All right, guys, I'd like to welcome you to the Mad Maker Show. Welcome back, everybody. We've got a special guest tonight, and we're going to be interviewing Gil
Poznanski. Oh, Poznanski.
Poznanski.
You
Now,
called out. I was waiting for you to pronounce it.
Poznanski.
we were talking about that earlier because my name is quite convoluted, and we were talking about I'm not trying to throw convoluted into your equation. I'm just saying that I feel the pain, right? We also have people like Harju. There's a guy called Daniel Harju, and it's not the way you actually supposed to say them. And there's all a bunch of. And by the way, the name
And Harvey.
who?
Harvey.
Oh, Harvey.
Sweater.
Unzweta. What the heck is going on with Unzweta? And then we have, get this, guys, Paige. Is that not insane crazy?
That's really difficult.
Paige is out there. So we'll be interviewing Gil in just a little bit and getting to know him. It's pretty exciting because, number one, there's a lot of similarities in sort of like the show that we're doing, interviewing people. He has something similar, and we're going to ask a little bit about that if you guys aren't aware of Gil's work. And frankly, I'm not aware of a lot, so because we're going to together interview him now. So I want to welcome you to the Mad Maker Show, and for the first time in a little while, I'm going to just mention to you guys this. This show is hosted by, JP, Doc Jared HIldabrant. When JP's not around, JP has things to do, and he travels all throughout Europe and to shows and this and that. Well, Doc is up in Pennsylvania. He comes in and he does the show, and so it's the three of us. And then last week we had this craziness. But I want to mention that we are called the Mad Maker Show because we interview folks that are creative, and the idea is that they're not quite the average person. They have different ideas. They produce things that the average person might not even consider even possible. And I know you guys out there in the chat know this because you're like those same people. But for people later on that see this, they'll know. So Mad Makers, it's what we're interested in. So that's my bit. I'll hand it off to you, JP.
Well, before I do all my social medias and all that, I just want to thank Eloy for being the co-host last week to Matt Huss's Mad Maker Show. And everyone else that participated in being a co-host due to my absence. By all accounts, it was a good episode. Sorry I couldn't be there, but unfortunately I was a bit poorly. My social medias, right, this is where I end up losing breath. Right, my YouTube is JP Woodwork. My Twitter and Instagram is JP_Woodwork. I'm 1/5 of the Makers International podcast. The websites are, mine is jp-woodwork.com and the podcast is makersinternationalpodcast.com. Both websites are sponsored by Steve Nealon at Harnell Media. The website is harnellmedia.com. I think that is about it.
Wow.
Back to you, Eloy.
But wait, did you say that all without?
I've also got a new T-shirt that can be found. Which is over at is it makersmedianetwork.com? Is that right? I'll get a link off of Steve. So Steve, if you're out in the chat, can you inbox me the link so I can post it over onto the YouTubes?
It's makersmedianetwork.com, and Steve now has link or wrench status, so he could link.
Oh, Steve can do it now, yeah.
Yeah. However, Steve, it would be cool if you would allow that JP, because in this situation, because JP is actually the official guy that does that. But whatever, it's a free fest for all, right?
Yep. So,
man, that was a you didn't even use one period or like comma in that whole thing, dude.
No, so I'm a professional, mate.
Well, look, I'm glad.
There's actually one thing I do want to mention. Next week, Sunday at 4:30 Eastern, is the podcast 100th episode as well. So I just wanted to let everyone know that we go live on YouTube at 4:30 p.m. Eastern on Makers International Podcast YouTube channel.
Awesome, dude. 100 episodes. Insane. I thought it was because you guys have a lot of episodes.
Yeah, 100 or 99 at the moment.
Not just a lot, but 99.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get on with it. So guys, we want to welcome Gil to the show. Dude, welcome.
Thank you so much, Eloy. It's really great to be here. And is that coming out?
Oh yeah, you're good. You're good.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. That's all right. It was jumping around for me. That's okay. So yeah, thank you so much for letting me come on board and share with everyone. It's when you were talking about the Mad Maker show and how you're after people who are creative and a little bit crazy and mad, it reminds me of a saying I used to have when I was a filmmaker, which was the sickness. Once you've got the sickness, that's it. You know, once you're infected, all you want to do is create and kind of share with everyone. So, you know, sickness, mad, it all works.
Oh, it's perfect, dude. And I'll tell you what, so we're gonna get into it, you know, so we get the points in, but I do want to mention that earlier, it's a very strange thing, and we talked a little bit about it. It's not strange at all. It's actually quite normal. But you live where?
I live in Melbourne, Australia.
When it's daytime for you, it's nighttime for us.
Right. So you're 10 o'clock at night. No, sorry, it's 10 a.m. my time and it's 8 o'clock your time. So that's one of the things that's really been a challenge for me, especially with the maker community in the US. I know that Chris Cute and I have been trying to catch up and just to have a quick chat. We keep missing each other because when he's available, I'm asleep, and when I'm asleep, he's available, and you know, I seem to feel like I'm on the moon at times.
Yeah.
Well, if you need to talk to him, I do a podcast with him every week.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd love to, and I mean, I've listened to the podcast. It's kind of an interesting thing, YouTube in general, because you get to, you know, as content creators, we get to share what is most personal with us, and then the audience feels like they know each other. So I feel like I know Chris, and you know, that's how I got involved in all of this, because I was watching Jimmy Marista's videos, and it got to the point where I was like, I had some time coming from work, which was kind of enforced because I'd saved up enough days. They were like, you've got to go and take these days. And I was like, what do I want to do? Like, I didn't want to sit at home and work in the shed by myself. I kind of wanted to reach out and meet all these inspiring people. So kind of my journey, at least into the maker community, was through Jimmy, where I just wrote him a letter and said, hey, I'm from Melbourne, Australia. If I come and to New York, can I come hang out with you for a few days, be a bit of a shop assistant, you know, here's my qualifications, so I'm not going to put my hand in the lathe and suddenly, you know, there's going to be a problem with that. And literally, I think one of the first things I said to Jimmy was, I don't want to freak you out, but I feel like I know you because I've kind of consumed everything you put out there. So I'm just going to talk to you like we know each other. And he was super cool. He was like, yeah, no problems. And within 20 minutes, we're talking like long lost brothers.
When was that? I saw, because, you know, when we do the Mad Maker show, I go prior to it and look at the guests' pictures and pick one out to, I don't know if you did you like the one where you're at the retro arcade thing? I just love making these artistic things. I look at all these pictures. I saw a picture of you with Durasta and all that. When was that you came over and you know, hung out and all that? When did that happen?
That happened for me in February 2017. Yeah, 2017. So that was like, I didn't really have, I was kind of a little bit by myself when it came to the creative and making stuff. For the people who don't know me, I call myself the kosher Tony Stark, and one of the reasons why is I'm Jewish. I'm a religious Jew, and meaning that I keep the Sabbath, and I keep kosher, and I keep all of that sort of stuff. So in that community, traditionally, kind of like it's not a hands-on community. Like, you know, when you think the Jewish community around the world, you're thinking lawyers and you're thinking doctors, you're thinking very cerebral ideas, people who are studying all the time. And here I am grinding metal, and like a lot of my community, like, what are you doing? Like, you can hire someone for that. And I'm like, dude, I would not hire someone at all. So it's a little bit, you know, there's a little bit of stereotype within that idea. But, you know, I was watching, I've always been creative. I've always pursued kind of, I don't like using the term artist, but in a true way, I guess I like absorbing what I get and then bringing my own flavor into it, and then turning it into a story or an experience for other people. And I think that's what art's all about. It's not thinking about the actual process, but being able to express yourself through it. And I think that one of the really interesting parts about that is we've got to stop thinking about talents and artistic endeavors as just being like playing music or singing or, athletes. It's, we need to start understanding that everything that is being built and created has a purpose. And usually it's what's most personal to the artist or to the creator or to the maker. So I found in that experience watching people like Jimmy, which was really funny because my first reaction when I saw Jimmy's YouTube stream was I was like, who the hell is this guy to do it? Because I was like angry that I wasn't doing it. Like, this is exactly where I wanted to be. So kind of we went a little bit in a circle, but what I ended up doing was I kind of held my breath and wrote this letter to Jimmy DiResta and said, hey, can I come over? And I thought I'd never get a response. And through that, just started documenting this trip that I took to the US and to Brazil.
Yeah.
Friends of mine were like, you do this really amazing stuff. Like, I don't know many people who would write to a stranger on the other side of the planet and then just go.
Well,
and I mean,
no, go ahead.
Oh no.
I was just going to say that's quite in that personality that he has and that openness publicly, in my opinion, is like what attributes to his success, because he's that way. It appears that he's that way. It's funny that you say that you said, I'm just going to talk to you like I know you, right? Like if you're an old time friend, because you see all these videos and stuff. It's kind of like, it's funny, and I'm not attributing this to you, but I don't know who it was that I read somewhere on Facebook that somebody, a maker, had a viewer show up at their house like with a pie or something, but like out of the blue. Out of the blue, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, who's this person? So there's levels, right? But yeah,
definitely.
I know, but it's an incredible thing, that openness, and yet it's quite a risky thing, because we're taught, I guess, I don't know about you, but like, try to be discreet. You don't want all this information out there.
Yeah, it is and it isn't. I mean, like, again, I didn't know what I was going to get into. So I was just going to be like, look, I'm going to go. It was kind of my excuse to go back to the US. I'd lived there for 9 years and I hadn't been back in almost 15. So it was kind of my excuse to go and visit some friends.
You lived here in the States?
Yeah, in Los Angeles for 9 years.
Oh, wow, dude.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Where in Los Angeles?
Started off in Westwood because I actually studied at UCLA, and then ended up in Santa Monica.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I lived out
finally getting an apartment and kind of going through. We can talk about that too. That was a whole. I studied film and television, and that was like my kind of.
Well, we're gonna get into that. Let's
journey. Yeah. We'll go into that, but let me finish with kind of this whole thing about.
All right. Sure.
With Maker. So. And you just touched upon it. I had this experience as well. This idea of people getting to know you. I went to a makeathon in Melbourne, and I went to the bathroom, and I just needed to go do what I needed to do. And as I was at the urinal, I kind of turned around. This guy was looking at me, and I turned around immediately, and then he went, "Hi, Gil, I watch you on YouTube." And I went, "That's great. Can I go wash my hands and we'll talk outside?" And it was like I had this moment where it was like you're kind of like known when people kind of go into the bathroom and they're waiting to say hello to you.
Well, let me say this. I'll just say this. I did not expect that I would have a moment like that, but I was at the home. I've told this story before, but I promised the guy that every time that somebody would mention it, I was at Home Depot, all sweaty and grimy, picking out lumber, and I hear this guy say, "Eloy, Escovedo Woodworking?" And I look, and far down the aisle, I see this figure coming at me, and I'm like, "Huh? Me?" And he goes, "Eloy, is it you?" And it's me, Ozzy. I'm like, "Ozzy? Ozzy." And I was calculating in my head quickly, like, who's this guy? Oh, is it Ozzy from Instagram? Yeah, it's Ozzy. It's me. And I just felt like it was so surreal, and we took pictures and stuff and all that. But it's a funny thing. I just wanted to inject that in there.
You got it.
wrap up your bit because I've got something to say, and then questions and whatnot. Go ahead.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I didn't want to take pictures in the bathroom. I thought that would be too creepy, but we ended up catching up and having a quick discussion. But really, all this came about when Jimmy kind of, I think at the time I was struggling to get 100 kind of subscribers so I could change my YouTube name because I didn't want to have just those random things. I wanted Gil Poznanski at the end of YouTube. That was the extent of my vanity at the time, and there was a shout out, and I kind of was just playing around and I said, look, subscribe to me and make Jimmy look good. And I kind of woke up 2 days later and had about 1,000 subscribers. And I was like, okay, you know what? I finally found a connection and an audience. So
awesome.
That was amazing. And I mean, you were saying that Jimmy's really open and we still keep in touch. We talk. I'm trying really hard to get him to come to Australia. I've got a few people who want to bring him out here because he's just, his reach is literally worldwide. There isn't a place where I didn't go for a short period of time after that where people were like, oh, I saw you on Jimmy's podcast or video log. And I was like, wow, like this is incredible. Like, and at no time is the person that you're seeing on YouTube not the person in real life. So, and you were talking about like my last point, and I don't want to miss this because it was a really funny moment. You talk about people knowing you through YouTube. Yeah. I was in his shop and he wanted something and I literally reached back and grabbed it and gave it to him. And he looked at me and he said, how did you know? And I said, well, you did that in one of your videos. Oh, I knew when you put it back after you used this big vulcanized piece of rubber. And he was like, and I'm like, I told you, man, I'm your shop assistant. I did my research. Whatever you need, I'll get for you, kind of thing. And it was just like this moment where I think for him and I, it was like, yeah, you're not a stranger to me, but I know you don't know me. So let's take this time and you can, we'll interact. And in a very short period of time, we were, laughing, giggling, and again, talking like we've known each other our whole lives.
All right. So yeah, I totally agree, and the perception of it and his friendliness and openness. And so let's stop there because we have questions to ask you, timelines to discover. But before we can even get to that, I want to ask JP, like, who's out there, and also if there's any questions. I don't know if they know Gil yet, or if some of them do, or if everybody does. So just hit us.
Yeah, we do have some questions, but I'll quickly run through the chat. We've got Tracy Keaton, John B. Happy, Steve Twidell. From Temple Boy Turnings, Mark Lindsay, Herb Lichtenberg, You Do It, Steve Lennon from Heinol Media, Mark Lindsay CNC, Daniel Hardew, Julian Martinez from 5x30 Woodworking, the Patricks from Patrick's Workshop, OJ's Woodworking's Craft, Anna's Workshop. Did I say Tracy Keaton? Well, she's got another mention if I didn't.
Tracy Keaton's there twice.
Yeah. Who else we got? Let's keep going. Quickly scroll through. Matt Huss is there as well. Javi is there. Someone called Bo Sal. They said, I like you. I don't know who they're talking to. I presume me. They said, I love heart you all. I don't know. Maybe they're talking to me because everyone loves me.
Right.
But yeah, that's it for the chat for now.
Let me tell you something.
Oh, Cello Wildman Tech as well.
Well, I was just gonna say this. All the people that matter to me, all those people, I know all those names and those personalities and those, inspiring. And so I'm glad that you're here with us to talk to Gil. All of you guys, I interact with you. I'm happy that you're. I've had a rough day, I'll tell you. And so I'm going to lay on the couch and tell you my troubles. No. But I'm very happy that you're here, and we're going to find out about Gil. I want to ask Gil, or actually, are there any? There's no questions yet. I hope there's none.
Yeah, we've got a few questions.
Okay, well, I don't want. See, okay, so we'll do this. Well, what do you want to do, JP? Do we allow the questions and then?
Well, we have got a question from Daniel Hardew, but I'm reluctant to ask it after last time's.
No, dude. Every time Hardew asks a question, Gil, The problem with
Yep.
Harju is this: he asks a good question that covers everything in the show, and then we just have to wrap it up.
Okay. I'll do whatever you want to do. If you want to ask the question, and then we can break it down if we need be. And it's up to you.
It's kind of ironic that Harju's logo is a picture of a nail, because his questions are the nail in the coffin. It's got at the end of the shows after his question.
Do your thing, dude. Go ahead and ask.
Right, I'll ask. Right, Julia Martinez says, "Is there any maker communities around you or in Australia in general?"
Absolutely, and that's my answer.
Yeah. Right. Anna's workshop is basically a very similar question. Are there any maker fairs in Australia?
Yes, there are, and in fact, the annual Maker Fair in Melbourne was something that I worked on and put together. So it's not Maker Fair from like Make Magazine, but we put together a thing called Mini Make Day, and there have been a number of mini Maker Fairs in Australia.
Okay.
I'm going to answer these so they don't shut down the interview. We can go into it as we discuss.
Frankie C CNC and Woodworking channel says, did Gil buy or build that shelf behind you?
This one? Yep. This one actually happens to be an IKEA shelf that my partner had before we ended up moving in together. So no, this isn't. But the things on top of it, most of the things you can see just behind me, that's let me see if I can grab for you. So this is a one of my loves is kind of space, and I always want to be an astronaut. So this thing is a 3-part external tank. I don't know. Let's see if I can pull back from the space shuttle that I've been printing because I don't have a model when I teach science and space to students. And in fact, let me grab this one as well. This is just to give you some scale. This happens to be a 3-part print of the space shuttle, which I'm going to be putting together, and then I will be mounting that onto the other booster rockets. So the boosters and the external tank. So these things I built, but not the actual, like, well, does it count if I put it together?
Sure.
Then yeah, I built it. Let me put it back. So.
Okie dokie. Right, and the reluctant question now from Mr. Harju is with regards to Maker Monday.
Yep.
Oh, he said, why? Harju, what's wrong with you, dude?
He said, can Gil talk about his format a bit? Is it driven by the time difference? I'm just curious to how he got to this.
Beautiful. You know what? I'm going to answer that question, but I think we'll leave that to when we talk about Makers Monday.
Bedus.
Ooh.
Mic drop.
Harju.
I think that there's some really interesting stuff that
there's a feel that is a crowbar on your nail, Harju.
No. Hey, you don't want Gil? You don't want to mess with Harju is up in the New England area, Massachusetts, building massive reproductions of furniture. You don't want to snub the guy, but I am very appreciative.
Well, the way I look at it, he'll at least hang on to hear the answer. So, you know.
Lucky he's got a better down on now.
Well, no, we'll touch on that. It's important because time goes quickly. So let's do that and touch on your Makers Monday. And we're going to Quentin Tarantino backwards because I want to ask you about where you're from. Well, we know Australia, but a little bit of history so that the people out there can, you know, sort of get a glimpse of your past and thoughts and all that. So we'll do that, but let's do the Makers Monday because that's a big deal. So go ahead and hit us. And before that, I want to Temple Boom. Thank you so much, dude. I hadn't seen you for like 2, 3, 4 days, and he recently popped up on Facebook, and I was wondering where the guy was. Thank you so much, Temple Boom. Go ahead, Gil.
No problems. Where to start with Makers Monday? I guess this came up for me, again, at the time that I was traveling to America to meet Jimmy, and really that was kind of my understanding that it wasn't just one channel, it was a whole community. And You know, for me, just, you know, that moment where I realized was, if anyone watches Jimmy's videos, I'm sure a lot of people do, he used to have a helper called Willie who used to work with him in Manhattan, and I believe he's still in Manhattan. And he walked past the shop, and I'm like, Willie, and he's like, yeah, and he goes, you're the guy from Australia? And I said, yeah. He goes, oh, you're one of us. That was the first thing he said to me. I'm like, well, I'm one of you? Like, what? And he goes, oh, you're one of us. You're cool. Like, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I realized that it wasn't just like Jimmy in a shop, and Brett had just started with him, Brett McAfee, and, you know, within a couple of days we were all kind of doing our own thing. But I realized I really love that idea of meeting people. And, you know, I had time with Jimmy. I kind of interviewed him. I did a little interview with Brett, but he was really reluctant at the time because he wasn't going to get involved with YouTube. And thank goodness he has, because if you've seen his channel, his videos are incredible. And at that moment, I was like, you know what? I kind of want to keep doing this, but I don't have the time and I don't have the resources to keep jumping on planes and going around and meeting every person. So is there a way for me to do this? And that kind of was the beginning of this idea of Makers Monday. For me, Makers Monday was all about being able to go and meet people. Originally, it was a 3-minute thing because everyone told me if you do anything longer than 3 minutes on YouTube, forget it. Like, people will just turn off. So I thought, you know, if I had 3 minutes just to introduce someone every week, it was kind of my way of meeting the makers that were out there and also sharing that with a wider audience. So my idea was, if the format was 5 questions and it was the same 5 questions to every person who came on the program, you get to know where the people are coming from because you already know what's going to be asked. And I found, like, the 3 questions are like, how do you define yourself? What was your last project you worked on? What's your favorite tool to work with? What's your favorite project of all time? And what's one skill you don't know that you want to learn in the future? And for me, that the kind of quintessential question was, what's your favorite tool? Because the answers to that really showed the personality and where people are coming from with their maker direction. So, you know, and some people will say, I like a bandsaw, or I like, you know, the lathe. And then other people will go, a pencil, you know, is for me is the tool that allows me to express myself the best, or my imagination, or, you know, the inspiration I get from walking down the street. And I found, like, when I was putting these interviews together, in that moment, I really kind of connected with the people who were the subject for that episode. And the other thing that I love doing with Makers Monday is not just keep it in the maker framework, in the sense of, you know, makers are woodworkers, or makers are, you know, kind of manual labor type. I've tried to open it up with some of the people that I've known. So I've had people such as Doug Drexler, who's an Academy Award-winning special effects artist, who came on really early on in the program, and I'm really appreciative of that, because there was, I think, maybe a handful of these episodes, and talked about his expression through the medium that he works on. And he started in a very physical special effects field where they were building models. Now he's going on to using digital tools, but his answer was the pencil. And if you're interested, definitely go back and take a look at the joy of him expressing that. He's all like, it's a pencil with a bit of lead in it, and people are writing on the walls. And I was like, oh, I love you, Doug. You know, because you get it. It's not always about the tool, but it's about what you can do with it. So I've really reached out. There's a few actors have been on board. We just recently had Jane Badler from the 80s TV series V, that, again, traditionally wouldn't be a maker, but she's creating content all the time, not just as an actress, but also as a filmmaker and as a producer. So the conversations that I have with makers I'm having those same conversations, you know, with people outside the maker framework. But they're just as valid, because it all comes down to being able to express yourself, and that's the power of maker culture.
Yeah, I agree with you and your view of the whole thing. You have this segment of people that work with, say, wood. It's somehow, in my opinion, wood is like the mainstay, or like the focal, like that. But there's so many, from painting to everything, right? Editing styles, film, just creativity, writers, all these things. And And yeah, I think it's correct to encompass all of it. It broadens everybody's horizon. So I am totally with you on that point. Like your vision, I totally agree with it. Yeah. So let me ask you this. A little bit about your past. Can you give us perspective, where you're from, grew up, a little bit of family? Just give us, in a nutshell, a little bit so that folks can get to know a little bit about your past.
Sure. So, so I was born in Melbourne, Australia, in the early '70s, and like I was when people ask me this question, I don't know how far back you want to go, but for me, my direction was really set when I was a 3-year-old. My father took me to see a movie that changed my life. And it sounds a little bit kind of, when I would tell the story 10 years ago, people were like, oh, that's kind of cute. And now everyone's all like, you're jumping on the bandwagon. But that movie for me was Star Wars. I mean, I, as a 3-year-old, wanted to be involved in whatever was on the screen. And it took me a little bit of time to realize that was a movie. It wasn't something that was going on, but I kind of really got it. And one of the things that I loved was this idea that in the future we'd be using technology. And that's really where I came from. So, I was one of these kids who kind of got in front of a computer. I was waiting to have my own robot. I wanted to go into space. This idea of exploration, using technology to explore and express myself, kind of was the direction that I came in. And as a child, it was kind of the ride of the film, but as I got older, I started learning all the different processes, and in fact, that led me into a career of filmmaking. So I always wanted to emulate what I saw, and I'm one of these people as well. And I think it's more the majority of people who learn through experience. So I have to do it myself, and then break it down and understand how it works. And at that point, kind of incorporate it into my bow. So when I fire my arrow as far as I can, I know what's going on. And again, take it into a more artistic area and be able to express it and use the conventions that people know to give them a different experience.
Tell us about the filmmaking. So did you, as a kid, pick up a camera and started messing with that? Was there any editing involved? Was it how did that come about?
So I was one of these people who consumed everything. Like an example is that when I was at high school, when it was a term break and you got 3 weeks off, I used to make deals with video libraries that I'd pay like $60 for a month and borrow as many weekly videos as I could. They would like limit them to like 7 at a time, and I'd literally go and watch 7 videos till like 11 o'clock, and then get my mother to drive me out, and again another 7 videos, and then watch them throughout the night and fall asleep. And like I would spend this time just watching everything. I was just completely consumed with the experience of being able to communicate visually, as I think most people are. And I took it a little bit to extremes, which was really interesting because I'd go to see a movie, and then it was the latest blockbuster, and I'd walk out and I'd be like, well, if I don't see 3 more videos, I don't feel satisfied. So I stopped doing that really quickly. But, that interest went on when I was in high school. I would prefer to go and write about film experiences or make films, usually with video. When I was younger, my father had a Super 8 camera, but I never had money to put the film in it. So I used to kind of look through the lens, and I'd take my toys and try to fly them across kind of what I could see. So I was trying to emulate that, but there's not. Australia has a film industry, but it's a very independent one. So when it comes to things like visual effects, we don't have the establishment that the US has. We don't have big companies that worked for 30 years on within the industry and were able to hone it. So what I was trying to do was absorb as much as I could, waiting for that opportunity to do it. And God bless my mother, because I was going to go and become a philosopher at university because I could argue really well. I had a girlfriend who was like, you're great at arguing. Just write down your arguments and you'll get a degree. Before that, I was actually working. My friends had all gone to university. I was working at a picture framing store, putting things together because that's what I do with my hands. And as I was applying for it, my mother said, you should really go and do a film course.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
So yeah, I have a sister who is a doctor who's got a PhD in microbiology, and I'm like the guy playing with cameras. So
you're the rebel.
Sorry?
You're the rebel.
Yeah, you know, my family to this day says we don't understand you. Like you're an alien. Like we all know what we're doing, and you're like, you know, you go out into the garage, and the next thing you know, we've got a robot walking down the street. And I never thought we'd see that.
What is it about people, Gil, that are intent, hell bent on the creative expression, you know, whatever that encompasses? What is it about those people that they're willing to throw caution to the wind?
I can't talk about anyone else. I can only talk about me. And for me, I was always trying to find my tribe, really. And that's exactly what it is. And that's, again, why I love the maker community, because for me, as I was mentioning before, I was surrounded by a whole lot of people who didn't understand it. Like, why would you want to weld something? Or why would you want to go into the garage and cut steel? And why would you want to, like, I don't get that. And for me, I was kind of standing on my own for a long time, going back and forth, trying to fit into that mold, and then just getting so frustrated that I'd have to go out and do something else. And usually it had to be something along the maker path. And I had some really interesting experiences where I ended up living in the US. I was really lucky. I worked my tail off and got a scholarship to UCLA in the film and television department. So now I'm actually working with all the people who inspired me. The very first talk at that school was given by a guy called Dean Cundy, who was a cinematographer that I absolutely was inspired by. And you can imagine I'm from the other side of the planet, so really on the wrong side of the tracks to have a career in any of this sort of stuff. And now I'm actually sitting face to face with someone whose work I had absorbed and just followed for years. And again, very similar to what happened with Jimmy DiResta, I kind of said to him, I've been reading your interviews, I've been watching stuff of yours, I'm going to talk to you like I know you. And I've always found that to open doors, because they kind of don't have to do the work then. I just kind of just revel in enjoyment to be able to say, hey, when you did this, what were you thinking about? And it's always worked really, really well for me. So, so I was able to go there. I got a master's in cinematography and directing, which was amazing. And then went and worked in the industry and worked with a lot of up and coming people who kind of got it. When I was in Melbourne, I had done my bachelor in film and became very good friends with James Wan and Lee Winnell. So they came out at that time and hung out with me, and they ended up doing the Saw films. So they ended up getting a certain amount of really amazing success, which is great to see. And I'm really glad that I was a small part of kind of their journey there.
One of the biggest things, and I just agree with your positions and your thus far everything you've said, and the attitude and the thought process and stuff. And what I notice is not just on the undercurrent is that you and it's apparent you like to have people tell their stories, and that is what film is, right? You're telling people's stories, if not your own, other people's. And I think it's such a healthy thing to do, to document, whether it's a fantastical thing or a true to life story of a person, and create a sense of, we talked about this earlier, create a sense of community and how they all connect, and it just spider webs everywhere. I think that's what's been going on with this maker community and all that. It's not a question really, unless you have any thoughts on that.
No, I agree with you, and I think that that's one of the strengths that really takes me. So I'm on this journey. I'm trying to find where I fit in. The film stuff, when it came to the work and the expression, loved it. The business side of it for me didn't work. So I didn't like the fact that you were only as good as your last film, or you're only as good as a number that came in at the end of the project. And to me, that was never my focus. My focus was all about connecting. And one of the side, everything's a step. And what I didn't realize that was happening was the people that I was connecting with on sets, I would set my cameras up, lights, I'd work the camera, and then there's a lot of time in between where they're making sure everything is right, and it's a lot of downtime. And I would end up with like the set builders and the prop makers. And they would be, like making all the toys that you want to play with. And slowly, like, in my downtime, I naturally kind of understand what needs to be done, so I just go and do it. It's something that a lot of my colleagues have always said. They'll be cutting something up, and I'll have a chat to them, and I'll continue cutting up things to help out. I never personally understood why one person would just stand there and just walk away. You can do the work in half the time, and everyone's happy. So that's exactly what happened. I ended up working on Star Trek Voyager as an intern, and ended up kind of in the camera department, but would end up in things like the makeup department or the props department, and I'd be painting things. And in a way, it was a little bit sly in the sense that I wanted copies of stuff. Like I wanted a phaser because you can't be Captain Kirk if you don't have the phaser. And at the end of the year, they were like, "Here, we've got some extras. Here's one for you." And I was like happy about it. But I learned these amazing skills that actually really empowered me. And in that moment, what I realized was I loved working with people. I love to be able to share, to add my interest into it, and also understand where they're coming from. So, I can do this work by myself in a shed, but where I really thrive is being able to work with others. And that's, again, what Makers Monday is all about. I'm not on camera and I'm not talking to them when they're doing the interview, but I am understanding where they're coming from and being able to present it in a way that can be documented, or is maybe the first call for people to understand that there's someone doing something that's really unique and specific, and then they can then take that relationship by following them or getting in touch with them or finding out more interviews like the Mad Maker Show, where there's a little bit more time to flesh out ideas.
I think that's brilliant, dude. And I'll tell you, well, totally. I'll tell you, I'm of the belief that, so I'll just throw some esoteric things here, but just to see what you say. And JP might have questions from the chat, but I'll just throw this at you. So I'm always one to look at people that go off on an endeavor, on a mission, on a project, and just the normal process of life where, it's just me and I want to do this, be it guitar or be it a project. They're always like, it's the other person. It's those people over there that are like the incredible, like, wow, these are the people. It's those people. And I'm of the mindset that you're those people. Like, you're the awesomeness. Like the people I interact with, I see them as superstars. I truly do. It's just that maybe most people haven't found out yet. I'll look at, like, a Harju or a Matt Haas, or with the way they, incorporate everybody, actually, that we interact with. And I see it like the potential is there. So what I'm getting at is this, if one tends to think of themselves, well, it's just me doing this. No, they're all freaking amazing people, superstars on that status in my mind, with the potential and creativity and all that. It's just boiling at the surface, and it's all happening real time, and it's a bunch of people that are all interconnected, and it's a thing that's happening. But most people, probably, I can't speak for everyone, most people are like that are these makers and creators and all that, are kind of like, well, it's just me living my life and I'm doing this and that. But the truth of the matter is that there's a story there with all these people. Yeah, right?
Absolutely. And I think ultimately, I've been thinking about a lot of this. I got an offer to go and do a PhD in kind of like making. And I mean, I'm not really going to pursue it because where they wanted me to take it was more in a learning area. And what I was really passionate about was understanding that everything that we create, every moment, our lives are all about experience. The only thing we take from this world is experience. Whether you're a spiritual person, religious person, whatever, your journey in life is the lessons you pick up and you learn so that you can get to the point where you are in your own power. And it sounds a little bit like mystical. Part of my journey after going to and working in Hollywood was that I went to Israel and ended up in a yeshiva, which is a Jewish seminary. And I was completely secular. I started learning about who I was. And when I was going through and learning the history of my people, and that is very much based in the Bible, there was a moment where the very first part of Genesis, there's two two kind of they're called parashas, but they're kind of like little chapters that are read every Saturday morning when you go to shul. And the first one talks about, you know, a higher power, God, that creates everything. Like there was nothing, and then there's the universe and the planet and the animals and everything there. And I'm like, wow, this is like the ultimate creator, right? And then the next part was that God blew our soul into our body through our nose. And at that point I went, no wonder we're all makers. No wonder we have this drive in ourselves to express. Now, whether you believe in God or the Bible, or if you don't, like, I'm happy because this works on both examples. If you go, it's all, someone made it up, right? Just to control the masses, which is the other extreme. Then my question is, why is our identity built upon the idea of creation, right? So all we know is there's a being that created us, and then we are a part of that being. Therefore, like on a spiritual soul level, we are infused with a soul from a creature or a story that creates. That's you know, I looked at that and I said so clearly, for me, did it mean that everything I was doing before and being kind of told maybe I was in the wrong direction, we don't do that? That's exactly the expression of what a human being does. And if you look around, you don't see dogs in submarines, and you don't see cats flying planes. You don't actually even see animals communicating the way we do, which is actually, again, in the Bible, the way God created the world was he spoke. So in that like little moment, my head exploded and I went, wow, okay, hang on a second. You know, everything that I was doing was as legitimate as everything else.
Yeah.
And you know, what I really wanted this PhD to be about was this idea that, you know, we honor the lawyers and the doctors and the judges and all, which is all cerebral, but we don't kind of honor the plumbers and the bricklayers and the carpenters. And it's like, you know what? I think they're closer to what our journey in life's all about.
Yeah. And by the way, just to add, JP's got some questions from out there, but just the last thing is that it's all too like mind-blowing to think that, you know, there's not something else out there.
Absolutely.
That's just I'm just putting that out there. But yeah, it's, I mean, like, we exist, we're communicating. I mean, it's just the thought, whatever. Me personally, madness and all, I kind of I would say that there's something more. But JP, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so we've got a few questions. First on, regrettably, comes from Daniel Harju. I think he's trying to get his own back from his last question not being answered. It says, it's actually a multiple of questions in one. He says, has Gil ever eaten kangaroo, thrown a boomerang, been on a walkabout, and tripped out with an Aboriginal peoples?
Yes. That was actually my bar mitzvah present. No, I'm only joking. No, I have. I've got a lot of friends who are Aboriginal. I throw boomerangs. Before I was religious, I had kangaroo, which was very gamey, and I personally didn't enjoy it. I've gone on walkabout, not just in Australia, but also in Brazil and in America, which is a great Australian tradition. And as for tripping out, legally, I'm not going to say anything, but
Hey, dude, the kangaroo thing. I'm sorry, JP, just real quick.
Sure.
There's a video, and obviously kangaroos are like as foreign as could be. Well, foreign for us here, but there's a video on YouTube, and dude, there's like an Australian lady, and she's living in her house with these huge glass freaking doors, and dude, like, this kangaroo bucks up. It looks like a freaking alien, dude. It comes up and the chest is all muscle. And then he looks at the glass and he goes, boom. And dude, it's the scariest freaking thing in the world, dude.
Right.
Blew my mind. I was like, kangaroos aren't those pouchy, cute little these? Holy smoke. Anyway,
You remember that video where the kangaroo got the dog in a headlock and that guy that punched it in the head?
Yeah. And that was, I mean, like, you know, that was incredible to see, because kangaroos will sit on their tails and they'll kick with their legs. And you can imagine, if they're popping around all day, their whole lifetime, you get hit by their legs once. And that's how they fight. They kick each other in the stomach, but they've got the abs. We don't. So a lot of people get killed by, you know, and when I say a lot, I'm talking over the history of colonization in Australia. I'm not talking every day. It's not like 5 people every day are killed by kangaroos.
Dude, those original Australians or like colonists or whatever the heck.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look at the history of Australia, but those original people, they're walking through the frickin' wilderness and they come up on this eared that stands on its legs like a human, and they look at that thing, dude. That's like you're looking for, dude. You gotta shoot those things. Well, I'm sorry. Wait.
No. You know what? Actually, you're right, because our issue right now is because so kind of cities are going into the wilderness as the population is growing. That's why you're getting experiences like kangaroos coming up to the houses, because we're going into their areas now. And in fact, there was a whole big outrage because the army cadet ship went out and culled all these kangaroos. So they took all these cadets out for firing practice and ended up slaughtering all these kangaroos, which is a shame because the kangaroos are our national emblems and our natural.
I'm sorry, dude. If you are confronted by a creature that can stand face to face with your ass, chest out, and he's like bucking up on you and saying, "Hey, mother, I've got you." You got scary, dude. Well, continue. I'm sorry.
Well, Australia is the country of poisonous spiders, snakes, emus, wallabies, you name it. But to be honest, look, when I first came to America to study, it was like 1999. Everyone was all like, "Do you know the crocodile hunter?" And I'm like, "No." And then I saw it, and they were like, "Man, he's amazing. He's like so brave." And I'm like, "Man, that guy's got no brain," because when you grow up in Australia, they go, "If you see an animal, just leave it alone. It's more scared of you to leave." And here's this guy. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna stick my finger and find out if it's a male or female." And I'm like, "This guy's nuts."
Yeah. You don't do. We have alligators here. I know you guys. We have alligators and crocodiles. So like Australia, we do have the crocodiles as well. And the whole idea is, end of the day, leave them alone. They're not going to mess with you. And that's truly the story, man. It's like, leave them alone. But still, I'm sorry. That video, dude, it just ingrained, burnt into my my mind. But we're going off.
I really wish I had a kangaroo that could just bounce behind me now and just scare you. That'll be my next film. Like, my next big film will be like,
You know what you should have done, though? Honestly, you should have had a kangaroo literally there with you, Hear him. Yeah, that would have. That's what I'm talking.
I tell you what. After we finish, go Google a TV show called Skippy, which was a kids show about.
Yeah, I remember that.
This kangaroo, the smartest kangaroo in the world. He would go out, like someone would fall in a ditch or something, break their leg. He'd come back. He'd be like, he'd make noises, and they were like, "What, Skip? What? Jimmy's broken his leg down by the waterfall." Oh, okay. And it will make you love like kangaroos and take away that fear.
I don't want to sound like I'm cowering here. I'm just saying that video was scary, for goodness sakes. Anna, thank you so much. Anna just received the box that I had sent that traveled through the Atlantic Ocean up through the Netherlands and through in towards Germany, and finally, after 20 years, it finally got there, and she posted some pictures of it on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you so much, Anna. I'm glad. Thank you. I'm honored that and that was for Makers Make It Matter, an auction that Steven Twidell had set up. Anyways, thank you. Go ahead, JP.
Speaking of Steve Twidell of Temple Boy Turnings, he's got a question, and it is, as a maker, is the Australian climate a blessing or a curse?
Interesting question. It depends what you're working with. I guess for woodworking, higher up in Australia, it's very dry, and the temperature's good, so you can dry out lumber. In Melbourne, we actually get a lot of Arctic winds, so winters are very wet and cold. I work with a lot of resins and fiberglass, so I try to do that in the summer so that it'll actually kick off. I've had a few projects that became really gummy and not usable because of it. There's a lot of natural Australian woods that we can get here, which is fantastic. So the climate in that sense, it can work for you. I know that Steve Turner is up in Queensland, and he does a lot of woodwork. Robin Lewis as well. They're in climates that work really, really well. For me, I find if I leave wood around, it'll absorb moisture and warp. So it can be a bit of a problem that way. But yeah, look, the biggest issue in Australia is just our distance. You guys have got some great products in the US that just because of distance, we can't get a hold of. When I was there working in the US, I used to love the Smooth On range of resins, and you can get that. You can go into any Hobby Lobby and get that. Here, it's extremely pricey, and there's only one or two options where you can actually purchase it, which means you're kind of stuck. So something that would cost maybe a $30 kit could cost me almost up to $200 to get it here. So you've got to find other options.
Mm-hmm. A question from Javi's Woodshop. He says, are American cult classics like Groundhog Day, Young Frankenstein, Blaine's Saddles, and A Christmas Story also cult classics down there?
Absolutely. Right over here is a movie poster of the film Tron, which is one of my enjoyment. Around the corner, I've got Escape from New York. Absolutely. Australia is very much an American media, outlet as such. 90%, I wouldn't say 90. It used to be 90, but more like 75 to 80% of everything that we have on television, and probably even more so when it comes to cinema. It's 100% when it comes to what we actually play in our cinemas. So yes, absolutely. Groundhog Day is one of my favorite films. All those sort of stuff is well understood. I can show you my DVD collection, which is kind of huge, and it's all American cinema. I do have a lot of European as well because I've gone out and searched for that. And again, being my interest in cinema, that's something I've done. But if you go into any video store, it's all the American cinema releases. And again, that's one of the reasons why I left. One of the reasons why I left the industry was as a creator, as someone who actually makes stuff. If you don't sell your product to the big distribution companies, you don't get seen. And the problem is that they want it for the lowest amount possible. So it is a really, really hard industry in that. Just to get something up and then being able to sell it and actually get it in front of people. That's changing now with Netflix. Netflix is amazing in the sense that an independent can come in, pitch something, and actually go and do it. And you see the Stranger Things and other even YouTube did the Karate Kid, Cobra Kai series.
Yeah, the Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
That would never have been done in the mainstream. So things are changing, which is really great.
Yeah. Right, we've got a question from Anna's Workshop. It says, what influence do social media have on your work?
Amazing. Like, for me, that is my conduit to keep in touch with the maker community. So for me, it did a number of things. So it influences me in being able to recreate or replicate some of the processes that go on. I'm working on something now, which was one of the projects that Jimmy DiResta had done a few years ago, and I'm going through that process myself to understand it. So I kind of, my learning formally comes from seeing and absorbing and then changing it up and then kind of, I don't want to say regurgitating, because that's like if I went and did exactly the same thing, but if I change it for my expression, being able to go and do that. And again, I've had many conversations with Jimmy about it, and he's more than happy to be that inspiration. Also socially, and this is one of the things that I think kind of, this is when we touched upon it, because of the time difference and because of that I work as kind of like a maker reaching out to the wider community. So I for the last 4 years, I worked for the City of Melbourne as their creative technologist activator, which is an incredible title that sounds like all I do is turn computers on and TVs on and then go home. But the idea was creating maker spaces within the library system and running programming there to teach people the basics. So a lot of people were coming in and saying, we heard about 3D printing, we don't understand it. My job was to go in there and give them an understanding, not just to press the buttons and print something out, but why is this important? Where does it go? Where does this fit in the idea of manufacturing, and why are makers taking this technology and getting so excited about it? And when you break it down, you realize that I couldn't have made this as a plastic piece unless I had $100,000 and a Chinese factory that was willing to make a minimum amount of 100,000. But I can do this at home, and I can make one, and I can share it with people. And then if it works off, be able to go and develop something like that. Then people start to understand what's going on in the community, not just the maker community, but the shift in manufacturing. And my focus is always about, people will come up and say, what do you want me to make? Or what should I create? What's going to make me money? And I always say to them, make that project that's going to keep you up at 3 in the morning, and it's at 9 you've got to be at work. Because that project that you're like at 3 in the morning going, I'm just that close, let me just do a little bit more, is the project that's going to talk to you. And it's really amazing to see people who do take that on. So, YouTube for me is always about what it's all about, because again, with the time difference, I find that I can't go and have a 4-hour chat with someone. My time in my window to be able to do that is really, really limited, and usually it's when I'm at work. So like today, I end up taking some time off so I could go and do the interview and speak to you guys now, but it's really hard to be at work and be sitting on your phone having a conversation. And I get a little jealous, just a little bit, when I was watching some Man Maker shows, and I know that Brett. I was watching Brett McAfee's interview, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I know him. I had a 4-hour conversation with him, on Instagram." And I'm like, "That's really cool. Gosh, I kind of wish I could do that." And I can't. So some of it comes out watching this sort of stuff and kind of filling in the blanks to understand where they're coming from. And again, that idea of kind of passively getting to know someone through social media, whether it's Facebook, whether it's YouTube, and then returning that by creating my own projects and sharing them.
Yeah, very cool. Right, we've got a few more. I'm gonna. It's actually going to be a first for the Mad Maker Show. I'm going to do a little segment called Makers Tuesday/Wednesday. So the first question is, what's the last project you made?
My last project that I made. So I was given a laser cutter to play with and share with a few people. So I just spent the last 2 days recreating a plaque at the start of a movie called Escape from New York, which if you know about the film, they turn Manhattan into a prison. And when the film opens, it climbs over the wall, and there's a plaque that says, New York maximum penitentiary, Manhattan Island. And I actually just created that out of cardboard, just as a project of my own. But I also have a lot of props that I've collected over the years, so I want to have that logo where I'm displaying them all. So I'm kind of venturing into laser cutting.
Okay, favorite tool?
My favorite tool, my excitement. And when I get excited about something, then I just go all out. So, whether it's 3D printing or coming up with a crazy idea or building a 5'11" Dalek that followed me down the street for a film project that I go and take out once a year to go get a Slurpee, and I spend 9 hours trying to get down the street because everyone's stopping and taking photos and asking questions. That excitement gets me through the projects. I learn very quickly when I'm like, you know what? I can't be bothered doing this anymore. It's a nice idea, but it's not for me.
Excellent. Favorite project to make?
From a maker perspective, my 5'11" Dalek called Orange Blend was the moment where I realized that I was a maker. I created him in my garage for a film project for the BBC when they were celebrating the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who. And the project was called My Roommate is a Dalek, and he is my roommate, and he still lives with me. And that was tapping also into an absolute desire as a child to be like Doctor Who was a real staple in Australia. We had agreements with BBC, so it was some of the stuff that was on the TV, and they would play it at 6 o'clock, and you'd have 4 channels, and 3 channels was the news, and you had Doctor Who. So, you had kids, you watched something a little bit different. I always thought that the Daleks was so much cooler than Doctor Who. So I always wanted one, and I was able to build him. I ended up building him with RC controllers, and then started playing around with Raspberry Pis and sensors so that he was actually fully articulated, and been playing with the Google AI that they're using for self-driving cars right now. So he actually kind of learns as he goes along, but you've got to do it in controlled areas because he's so big. If he hit a car, I'd be up for quite a bit for repairing. But and these are things that I haven't really shared with my YouTube community because I kind of think that they're old things. I created him in 2014, but he comes into classes with me, and when you've got students that don't want to interact and you've got this big thing standing and talking next to you, they're right there. So from a maker perspective, I think that's definitely like the project I'm most happy about. From a more social media thing, Makers Monday, 100%, because I get to meet great people, and I even see it now. Some of the early people on Makers Monday have gone on and they've created podcasts and they've created their own channels, and Steve Maker was one of these guys who was really, like, when he started, he had maybe 5 followers, and I'm so proud of him, and I don't have a reason to be proud of him at all, but just to see where he's taken it, and he's now got a blog, he did vlogs. That was what it's all about. And we've spoken many times, and he's been really thankful. He's like, I didn't have anyone, like I didn't really have an audience, and you still put me on the program. And it's like, that's me. That's for me. Like I want every person to get a chance to be able to share what they have. And my selfishness is, if you're willing to get in front of a camera, go and do it. It's harder for me to get people who aren't comfortable in front of the camera. So that's where I need to go and be there and actually do the interview live. But Makers Monday for me, I hope it goes for a very long time, and I hope I have a smile when I see like Fools with Tools and two parts of the 3-part team were people who were on Makers Monday and somehow connected. I'm not saying they connected through Makers Monday, but maybe that was a small like little step. They brought them together, and they're doing amazing stuff. It's fantastic. I get a little jealous because I can't talk to them anymore. I've got to speak to their agents.
Skill you most want to learn?
Oh, probably laying out like using vectors or CAD. Those 2 things are the things that I'm really working hard on. You know what? I just realized I actually have a Makers Monday episode that I am holding if I don't have anyone, and that's me. And I just realized you guys have got it now. I have to go do it all over again. But CAD, I think
just make up something.
Yeah, I'll make something up. It's all good. CAD design, being able to actually to get what's in my head out in a workflow process, so I can send it to a CNC, or I can send it to a 3D printer, or I can send it to a laser cutter. Those are the things that I want. And probably time management. That's the other thing. I'm fed up with staying up till 2 in the morning and stopping because my eyes are going blurry.
Yeah. And lastly, up on the top shelf behind you, is that an Ep209?
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
I've been staring at that all night.
Fantastic. Yeah. One of the greatest robot designs on the planet, as far as I was concerned. Again, one of those things that I saw when I was younger and was really inspired. I couldn't help it. And I think just below, I've also got a Dalek and Ratchet from Transformers. So I try to surround myself by the things that inspire me, so that everyone has hard days. We're talking very openly and very positively, which is fantastic. But there are times where I'm sitting back and I'm like, what am I doing? I could be working at 7-Eleven right now and making a whole lot more money. And I'm sitting there and kind of like bang my head against the table because I thought I knew something was going to work and it didn't come out the right way. And it's hard. You're creative. You're putting yourself out there. It's not just about the process. You're trying to communicate something, and because we're kind of like fleshy meat bags, we make mistakes. And I'm really lucky that I have a partner. She's amazing, and when we met, she understood that I had this desire and this drive, and has always been really, really positive about me being able to go and do that. So I feel myself really blessed, as opposed to other experiences I've had where they're like, you can't do that. Don't go make that sort of stuff. You're wasting time. It doesn't lead anything. How much money will it make? Oh, have I heard that many times?
Right, there you go, Eloy. You can have your show back now, mate.
Well, that was excellent, dude. That's like the first time ever, no? That introduction into that little, I like that, dude. That rapid fire question thing.
The little makers Tuesday stroke Wednesday, because I believe me and Gil are both on Wednesday at the moment.
Yeah.
Don't leave him with an uncomfortable silence.
I'm just wondering how many times I'm like, do I have to change my questions now? Like, no, it's great, and I appreciate, and I really thank you guys for actually asking those questions, because again, as I said, I had this backup episode, and I kept thinking to myself, do people really want to hear this? You know, it's one of the challenges that I have on my channel right now is the fact that, you know, I kind of really came from an empowering position to allow others to try and, you know, find their audiences, and then I came back with the stuff that I want to do, and that stuff never really goes anywhere. So, you know, recently I went back and shared a zombie infection scanner that I made for an art show, which I'm really proud of, and even making the YouTube video. I was like, you know what, I don't want to just stand here and talk and just show it off. So at the start, I kind of built this whole like little story that it's, you know, 7 hours in the future and the zombies are all there. And I, like, at the end of it, I'm really happy with what's going on. And it's like 72 views for like a week.
Yeah, dude, you know, it's, you know, it is, that's one of my the things that I think of as well. But what are you going to do? It's like, so like, I always tell like my buddies when I'm on a hangout, it's like, particularly Patrick's, like sometimes it'll end up with just me and Patrick's workshop hanging out, you know, at the end of, and I'll tell him, dude, you know, because he, you know, he does like jigs and shop stuff, and like he'll put out a video, like a jig, and it's like 24,000 views in like 3 days. He'll put out, you know, and it's like just rolling, right? And it's a jig, it's made out of wood and this and that. And, you know, I'll do like a box with a freaking skull, you know, shattered off to the side, or I'll climb up a freaking tree and cut down to this, and, you know, I don't know what the heck, you know, and it's like, it is what it is, you know. Some things get,
absolutely.
And so you can never, we talk about that all the time because we're on social media, and like, so I've come to the conclusion that I'm gonna do what I want, the way I want, like a stubborn, you know what I'm saying, the business plan or whatever is. I do what the heck I want. I'm documenting my life, and so be it, you know. But it's like, who knows anymore?
You know, and don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about it. I think it's amazing that I've got anyone who's interested in taking a look at it at all. You know, the whole YouTube project for me came out of a book project that I had started, not a book to publish, but a book for myself. One of the things that I realized was that I didn't really give myself credit for the things that I achieved. So at the end of the day, I would sit back and I'd be like, yeah, I didn't do anything today. Because of that idea of like playing is not legitimate, or creating something is not really legitimate, or if you don't get a paycheck at the end, it's kind of not legitimate.
And
I was like, you know what? I'm actually creating these amazing things. And again, Audrey, my partner, was the one who actually said to me, she's like, you've done like these 4 things that you kicked out of the, you know, you kick goals on all these things. You're like, this one's done, this one's about to be done. She's like, you've got to start understanding that you are achieving, you're doing these amazing things. So I realized that because I forget about them, you know, one day when I have a family, I don't want my kids to come up to me and go like, hey, Dad, what did you do? And I'm like, I didn't do anything. So I started writing down these things that I do and took photos, and that became the blog, and the blog eventually evolved into the YouTube. I think partly going back to what I was talking about with Jimmy, like Jimmy's such a great example of success, you know. And I remember I said, there's no way I can get to what you're doing. He goes, absolutely you can. And I kind of, to begin with, started trying to emulate what Jimmy was doing. And I realized, I woke up one night and I was like, I'm not Jimmy. I'm not, that's the path not going to work for me. And it's been a bit of a struggle.
It's good that you're self-observant. But look, just to be clear, the whole thing is that we're a paradox onto ourselves. We're just a cycle of paradox. You know, on the one extreme or on the one side, you know, you want success and stuff because, you know, hey, I'm doing this thing and I want it to be seen by a lot of people, because there's everything, you know, there's a financial aspect to it. An aspect where it allows you to do other things, you know, be it t-shirts. Look, I'm wearing a JP t-shirt. See, so there's a whole thing. On the other hand, you know, you're creating things for the sake of itself. And it's just a vicious. It's the human paradox, dude. There's so much competition out there. But go ahead.
So the thing for me, at least, is like the people outside the maker community don't understand. Like, you know, and when they put a monetary value to it, they can go, oh, well, that's legitimate. And I get it. And for me, my journey right now is to actually go and take it and become that documentation process again for me. So, you know, there was a number of people that I reached out to on Makers Monday who literally said to me, if you want to interview me, you have to pay me. Now, they weren't from the maker community, but they were from like the wider creative community who were like, my story has a value. And I was like, that's cool, man. Let me show you how much I've made out of my most successful Makers Monday video. And it's like 20 cents. And I'm like, I'm happy to give it to you. But if you're going to ask me for like a couple of $100 for a 3-minute thing, which is what they were asking, it's like, that's not the purpose of it. So, but I understand what they were coming back from. They were getting, their legitimacy was coming from the value. And that's a society-wide thing. That's not a maker thing. That's not a personal thing. Society will only say that it has value if there's, you know, a number of a value amount attached to it.
Oh,
and
totally,
again, I go,
totally.
Like, that's not what I'm on about. Like, that's not where I'm coming from. You know, I have a very good friend of mine that I met through kind of my YouTube journey, and he is probably like the Australian version of Jimmy DiResta. Like, he can do anything, and he's like one of the most amazing people that I know. But he doesn't think artistically; he thinks engineering wise. So he goes and refurbs equipment, and you know, he answers questions, and something breaks, and he can go in there and shore it up and make it work again. And you know, I said to him the other day, I said, I wish I had enough money in the bank that I would come every single day and help you out. And there's no relationship with work or anything like that, because this is what I love doing.
Yeah.
And he said, absolutely, because we're equals in that. There's no, like, I've got to do this because he says it or any of that sort of stuff. And again, that's what I find the maker community is so empowering about, is that I can go into my shed and I can go make a zombie infection scanner, or I can go make a Dalek, or I can go and make a light up sign, or I could go make a model of the space shuttle and share it with people. And yeah, great. I mean, I know that I'm not known, I'm best known for Makers Monday, not for my projects, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't have legitimacy. And, you know, you go and you see the Casey Neistats, and you know, I was watching him furiously in the last couple of months, trying to understand what's the best way for me to express myself on YouTube. And I realized, you know, he's sharing his day, but there's no like, I don't mean this in a bad way. I think Casey Neistat's an amazing guy, but there's actually no content. You'll ride with him to the meeting, and then the video stops at the door, and then he comes out and he goes, I had a great meeting.
Hold on. Let me just say this to you. That's exactly it. The whole idea, you know, is the attention span factor. So he's setting things up. Just an example where the viewer is like, he's setting you up so that you follow him around, you know, and there's nothing happening. You think there's something's about to happen, something might happen. So at the end of the day, he's got like 2,000 videos with nothing really. Sure, something's happened, but the point is that it's like a attention span grabber from one moment to the next. And I've mentioned this before privately or maybe here, but there's like this thing. They've debunked it, but they say like the human attention span is like worse than a goldfish. I don't know if you've seen that thing. It turned out to be not necessarily true, that there is shortness, but so it's hard to keep people, you know, their attention. And so you end up with a select group of people that will go on with you because they're quite interested in what you're doing, and you know, their minds are receptive. But most people, they want to see video games and like explosions, and you know, because that's just whatever. That's not a question.
No, I agree with you. You know, I joke about it. I said, you know, for all the study that I did at UCLA and working in the film industry, I always was writing scripts and creating projects that had like deep meaning inside, because they're the cult films that go on and people watch, you know, 50 years later. And it was, again, when I went to Jerusalem and started studying at Yeshiva that I learned to become a great filmmaker. And I realized in that moment as well that it wasn't the message, it was the distraction. As long as you can keep people distracted, and they're going to see what's coming up next. And that's not a bad thing, because you can use that mechanism to actually go and teach. But it's a bad thing when it's only distraction, when there's nothing at the end of it that they can go and take away with. And I mean, this is going back into my kind of storytelling past, and storytelling used to be town criers that used to go from one town to another with a bell, and they would tell you a story where you could take a moral or maybe apply it to a situation that you might have in your life, and they'll get paid for that. And filmmakers have become the modern day storytellers. But what's actually happened over time is it's all about the distraction. It's all about the special effect, or the Matrix. The first Matrix film came out, and everyone loved it. The second one came out, and I saw it opening day with all my friends, and I walked out, and I said to them, "What was it about?" And they go, "Man, it was the greatest thing in the world." I said, "Really? Cool. What was it about?" "I don't know." And I remember going back and seeing it twice with a notepad, writing dialogue at the end where he meets the architect or whatever they called him. Yeah. And I'm like, I do this professionally. I had no idea what's going on. I have no idea.
There's this thing in music, and it's applicable, I think, somewhere it'll. So there's this thing called the Loudness War. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No, but I can imagine.
So what happens is with the Loudness War is, in order to, because of competition in music, they continuously edit or mix their tracks to get louder and louder. But using the equipment that they do, compressors and limiters and all that, they crush the sound so that everything is bumped up. But by doing so, the dynamics of instruments, say you'll have a violin, and then the trough, and excitement points of a song gets so condensed, and everything sounds muddled and yet louder. You don't hear dynamics. And what's happened is that true audiophiles and people they've noticed it, and it comes to the point where music is so in your face and so, just crushing the signal that it becomes crap, and so that whole attention thing that they do with video and audio, it's everywhere, but it's ramped up, generation to generation, year after year, to the point where it's like insanity, man. No?
Yeah. And what you end up getting, and I mean, YouTube's kind of fallen into this too. And again, I wasn't really a big YouTube person, and then when I got into it, I'm trying to understand the process. Like, coming from a traditional filmmaking background, the process of YouTube has nothing to do with it. Like, the very first video I made, it took me 4.5 weeks to edit it and get it perfect, and it came out, and someone said, "Great, do it again for next week." And I was like, "Are you out of your mind? Like, you have no idea how much I did." And then I realized that idea of having time and like having that select window of perfection that you then send out and people invest in, that model has completely broken. I was at Advertising Week actually giving a talk about storytelling and technology, and YouTube was there, and they were interviewing people, and they got me in for a very short piece, and I looked at their camera stuff, and I was like, wow, is that the like top of the line Canon camera that's 50 million or whatever it was? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, oh, cool, can you show it to me, because of my interest and my background. And I made a comment to them, and I said, wasn't YouTube all about like kind of making videos on your iPhone and putting it straight up there? And they kind of laughed and were like, yeah, but you've got to, there's so much competition now, you've got to have everything. And it was like, yeah, but it's all about the content. So I think I had this like idea when I was going on YouTube, and I'm being extremely honest here, that people would see my genius. They would see the things, and I would find that audience through. And again, Jimmy DeRista did me a huge favor by bringing a lot of people across. But in the last year and a half, I haven't been able to break 1550 subscribers, and I think I'm kind of on that line right now. And every time I get there, then I start losing people, and it's kind of like this kind of mismatch of the content. I'll do Makers Monday a project, and I'm gonna do the project and everyone bails off, or I'll do a video log and it'll go up and then it'll disappear again. I think the real strength of creators is actually what we're discussing, being able to be true to your vision, and whether or not that actually translates to subscribers and revenue. I think ultimately what you end up having is you have the cutie pies and the Casey Neistats that find what works, but I find there is there's no real going from one point to another. Like, you know, it does happen. Casey's wife's pregnant right now, so a lot of people are watching that journey, and that's wonderful. And it's going to be great for his family. But at the same time, you know, I realize, and I don't mean this to be critical at all. It's not. I am extremely, I don't want to say jealous, but because I'm not. But I would love to have been able to create that kind of audience. And he's creating almost every day. And you know, I was like, okay, I'm going to do 3 times a week, and it's like, okay, I'm going to do 2 times a week. You know, you've got to make this your full-time job and have that put through to be able to pay yourself. And it's kind of a chicken and an egg. So, you know, the maker community, I don't see it all being on YouTube, but it's an amazing thing that I can have this conversation with you. You and I would never have met if it wasn't for Makers Monday and reaching out and you being kind enough to say, yeah, I'd love to be a part of it.
Well,
and then being able to.
Pleasure and honor, of course, man. I was honored to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about how you guys go about it with the Man Maker Show, but I'm forever writing emails. It's a numbers game for me. It's like, you know, I've done everything from going into like, I like to make it, you know, make stuff groups and then seeing people who like the Makers Monday and then sending them off stuff and seeing what they're on about, to, you know, even going through people that I know, and you start seeing, you know, mutual friends and going, well, that guy's obviously a maker because he's got 17 people who are mutual friends of mine who are makers. So let's go and send something out. And there's a lot of people who go, yeah, I'd love to, and then nothing ever happens. And then there are some people who are like that and understand the opportunity and what it's all about. So, you know, it's cold calling. I always had this idea, I'll do 5 and then people will come to me. Yeah. And again, it's not me thinking that I'm something amazing. It's what I was hoping was that a wider audience would go, hey, you know what? That's a great opportunity for me to share, and let me find my audience and let me see what I can do.
It is. Look, what you're doing is necessary. Things like, okay, so what you're doing, what JP is doing in other formats with Makers International, and then you have well, there's other things like podcasts. You know, with Tim Sway and Lutz, you know, Reclaimed. There's so many different things, and then you have individuals doing podcasts, like say Keith Decent up in New York. He does, and you know, so and there's all these different things, and you know, I've always said that there's variations of success and sort of community, you know, focal points. So you'll have someone like, say, Jimmy DeRessa, where everybody and outside of the community, but you have all these, you know, extensions all throughout. And I've said this before, in the future, you'll have like one of those sort of, you know, auction type road shows. I forget what the heck the name is. But, you know, on TV, they bring in, like, antiques and stuff, and they look at it and whatnot, and they say, oh, I don't know if you have this in Australia.
The Antique Roadshow.
The Antique
Roadshow. Yeah, we have Antique Roadshow.
Okay, so I see it, like, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, we're all gone. But there'll be some person, and they bring in, like, a giraffe with, like, I don't know, like, a horn on it and stuff, and, like, oh, this was made by JP, because, you know, in the summer of 2011, he decided to make a giraffe, and he said, why not put and that horn was actually delivered by, I don't know, Heath Knuckles, because he had extra epoxy. But in truth, this other person had, and then it's all and to me, you know, because my enjoyment, and this is just me, is looking back at history videos and, you know, stories and all that. And I totally see that happening, man. In the future, they'll have like a JP freaking cup that he turned, and then they'll say, "This, ma'am, this JP cup," and then they'll look at the video, and JP's there. Oh, look, there's a cup
right there.
You know, and so they'll see all these things, and I think that the value in that is actually priceless. So what you're doing by providing that and having all those people in there, which is kind of like a carbon copy, sort of, or you know, negative of what we're doing and what all these people are. I think that it's valuable, and the fact that there's various places where this is occurring, the better, because what you'll end up having is you know, a snapshot of, say, let's say, you know, whoever, whatever Maker Joe, you do your bit with them over here on the Mad Maker Show as well. Then on another podcast, you have variations of that interview, and so it's all so rich and wonderful. To me, the value is in that. But while we're at it here, we want to get more views, don't we? So let's be honest, so that we understand.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So
I started this and I was like, subscribers, who cares? You know, and it's like one goes away. I'm like, what did I do? You know, and it's a bit of a vicious cycle in that. But at the same time, it's you know, I try. The videos that I'm happiest with are the ones that I go and I watch again. So there was one where I learned how to arc weld a stand for my bandsaw. And like I put time in it, but I'll go back and watch it and just smile because I like the way I told the story without having to talk about it. And you know, it's that old line out of The Godfather is like, you know, I thought I was out and they pulled me back in. You know, the fact that I'm using my skills that I'm so passionate about and learned and put so much time in. When I walked away, I was like, I'm done. And here I am being able to express myself without it being dictated by a group think or anything like that. You know, I'm not working for a company. I'm not just going through the process to get a paycheck, but I'm actually doing it and investing in it in the same way that I invest in my maker skills. So yeah, it's really cool. So
let me ask you this, and we've learned quite a bit. We never cover everything because I mean, who can cover, you know, the lifespan of it within a certain amount of time? But what, in a nutshell, when it comes to, for Gil, when it comes to failure, could be failure of a project, just down on the fact that, you know, you want something to go one way, it goes the other way, or somebody comes up to you and is discouraged. What is your philosophy, your life lesson, your wisdom that you would impart or self-reflect as well? What would you tell someone? Hey man, this and that, when it comes to struggling in an endeavor, you know, what would be Gil's philosophy?
That in the failure is learning. So, you know, it's when you fall on your butt and I'm not too sure where it goes. That's really, for me, the moment where we actually learn. I actually don't, you know, Benjamin Franklin once said, you know, tell me and I'll forget, you know, teach me and I'll, you know, I think it's like teach me and I'll memorize it or something. But if you engage me, I'll learn. And I think that's really kind of important. I am the person I am now, both professionally and as a maker on a hobbyist side, because when I was going through my learning skills, there was no one out here who was doing it. It was either extreme people in woodwork who would, that's all they did. You know, and they were kind of like the weird people you didn't want to talk to in some respect, but there wasn't that kind of conglomeration of taking an idea and being able to put it together with a skill and being able to take it out and spread it out further. So for me, you know, being a creative person, I also have that tendency to be a little harsher. I think out of all the people that I know, that will say you're harsher on yourself than anyone else will ever be on you. And for me, it's not about perfection, but it's about being able to take that moment. And it's been a long journey for me to say when something fails, it's just in this moment. Like you have an opportunity there to say, cool, let's go learn something else. Let's go ask for some help. Let's go and think of it in a different way and see if we can get to the result. And that win is like the most addictive dopamine thing in my brain, because to sit back and go, I achieved what I wanted to do is incredibly empowering. And in that moment, if no one gets it, at all, if I don't share it, if no one gets it, it doesn't matter, because what I've done is I set myself a goal and was able to get there. So I have a lot of friends of mine who are actors. I have a really good friend of mine who has done incredibly. He's from Australia, but he's actually a martial arts actor who's gone to Europe and has done some amazing Asia, and he's done amazing stuff. And we began together. His actual first ever acting role was in a film that I made when I was at university. We've been very good friends, and you know, constantly he'll call me up, he'll drive over, and he goes, "Right now, I'm terrified of failure." And I look at him and I just go, do you have the opportunity? And he's like, yeah. And I go, you've already won. The fact that they're talking to you, you've already won.
Very
like,
good.
go there, do your best. If it's not for what they do, fine, no problems. But you know what? You've already gotten there. And I think that for me is what YouTube is being able to go up here and share my stuff. It's like I've already won on that success, personal success level, because people are watching. And when someone writes a comment and it's like, hey, that's cool. Like, to me, I'm like, thank you. It's one thing to get a thumbs up, but when you've actually invested that idea, it's wonderful. And again, it's not about like, oh, that's great, I want to buy it, but or anything like that. It's just like, hey, I see what you're doing. So I always come back to those moments. Things like, we started this conversation talking about my trip, my Maker Fair, my Maker, I think I call it Maker Tour, 2017, which I never thought I'd be able to do, let alone would someone be interested in spending time with me. Because, in the case of Jimmy, that's his work. Like, I didn't want to take away from that. But to see where that's come through, working for the city of Melbourne, and then being able to continue to see the opportunities outside, leave, work for myself, see what other opportunities come out. It's hard, it's really hard. I find myself a little bit of a kind of like a pathfinder over here, because one of the early questions were, are there maker spaces? Is there maker fairs? Yes, but we're about 20 years behind America. So there were a lot of people that looked at what was going on in the US. There's a gentleman here who created the first maker space. He actually calls it a hacker space here, and he was looking at things like the Homebrew Computer Club in the 60s and 70s as inspiration, and wanted to have something like that here, and it evolved into more of a maker culture, maker space. But because we are kind of behind a little bit, and we're trying to learn those lessons, and because the Australian communities are very differently set up from the US, so we have a lot of people, but they're all spread out. So we don't have that same, kind of ability to go and meet up and okay, cool, let's all go down to the Atlanta Wood, the Wood Show, and we can all have this amazing experience and opportunity. And I know that from that because of that distance and because of the time difference, and you've got to kind of find these paths yourself. And it's hard. I'll be the first one to say there are times where, do you know the Silby lathe, the Sherline lathe? Those little mini lathes that you can buy. You should buy them in Sears, and there's a whole community of machinists that buy these like tiny little lathes that are about this big. Well, they were made in actually down the street from where I was born, in Victoria, Australia, made by a guy called John Silby. And he went and I think it was in the 60s, made an agreement with Sears. He made these machines in Australia, and then he sold the company to an American guy who, this company's huge. Like, it's if you're interested, look up Sherline.com. They have a huge facility that makes thousands of machines, and they have a community. And I went, he actually made a whole lot of these little tools that I had collected over my lifetime. And I was able to find him, and I said, look, I would really love to interview you, because I think you're an amazing, your journey's amazing. And, this idea that this small thing came from Australia, and it had such an outreach, not only to the US, but right around the world. And I sent him this email, and he wrote back to me, and he said, I'm not interested in talking to you. And I was like, wow, okay, And he was kind enough to say, I saw the email, I was going to dump it, but I wanted to write back to you. He's like, I'm not interested in talking to you. If things change, I'll get in contact. And I wrote back to him just saying, thank you so much for letting me know. I just wanted to let you know that I think there's a lot of people who'd be interested in your journey, and I would really love to share that experience. But I mean, I've got a feeling something else happened. It had nothing to do with me as such.
Right.
But, we don't have many of those examples.
See, that would have been perfect. That would have been a perfect opportunity for that one person to, show everybody, hey, this is my story behind and then you get.
Exactly. And not just that, it inspire another generation to go, yeah, you know what, this thing came out, and okay, you made it for one thing, and it ended up inspiring, makers all around the world. And I have one of his first machines that were made in Australia that is older than I am, and I love that thing. And again, just to be able to say, in a way, this is my way of saying thank you. So, in that moment, I was like really low. I was like, I'm not going to ask anyone anything ever again. And then I realized, look, it was something that I've been working on. A lot of people say my superpower is that I'll ask, but it's a hard thing to ask and to have people just shut you down. So, it is a numbers game. It is one of those things, but definitely in those moments, the question comes down to is just, you win the minute you ask, whether it's a yes or a no, because that's the challenge. And you win the minute you pick up a tool and you start a project, even if you don't finish it, because when you haven't started it, forget it. You haven't,
So let me, well, yeah, very good. Let me ask you this question. Did you enjoy the show?
Absolutely.
All right. So
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this. Will you come back and see us?
Absolutely. I just got the chance to share what I'm most passionate about with people who get it for an hour or something. Like, I wish I could do this every day.
Well, look, man, we're incredibly appreciative and thankful that you would, have us, give us the time to interview and ask you these questions, and for you to put these thoughts on record, which, funny enough, it's actually what you do for everybody out there. And I think it's a highly important task, job, adventure to do that, because of what we've spoken of before. I think it's just good karma overall, on the creative level, on many levels. So I really thank you for hanging out with us, man. Are there any? I have all the links posted in the description so folks can go find you. And afterwards, as the days and weeks go by, we'll extract many clips of our conversations, and I'll title it, you talking about kangaroos, or you talking about, working on the set of so and so. And we'll do little sort of snippets to keep propagating the ideas, to keep propagating, the makers and creators that we're a community and part of. So, are there any specifics you would like to direct people to go check out and all?
I mean, we've been talking a lot about Makers Monday. There's a playlist that runs through. I think we're about 67 episodes. One of my goals is to not miss a Monday, and since the very first one, which was Jimmy DeResta and then Brett, I actually been working extremely hard to make sure that it comes out. So check it out. The interviews, some of the early ones, the audio is a little bit crazy, but that's because I was learning a new skill. But I think that definitely check that out. And if you are a maker yourself and you would like to come on the program, there's a link that you can go fill out a form. I'll get you all the information, and I would love to be able to be one small link in the chain of your success, every maker's success. Just to be able to help that out. So that's the first thing. As I mentioned before, I'm trying to break that 1550. So if you want to take a bit of a challenge, go to my YouTube and see what's going on there. I do a lot of, it's a mix of things. You've got Makers Monday, you've got a video log, you've got presentations that I've given professionally where I've recorded them and taken little bits out, talking about things like maker culture in Australia, maker culture in the library systems, maker culture in education, because that's right now the focus in Australia, but also talking about being a maker. Where did maker culture come from in the first place? Like, did it, I believe it's been there from day one, as I mentioned earlier before. But like, where did this formal idea come from? So there's a whole lot of stuff like that, and a little bit of kind of even the film stuff, talking about some. I think I had some radio interviews talking about Star Wars when it was coming about and the history of it. So it gives you a bit of an insight of who I am as such. I'd love to keep in touch with you guys. Directly, obviously, Eloy, I have spoken to you, and JP, I've just met you for the first time. Feel free to hit me up on Facebook and have conversations. If I don't get back to you guys, it's not that I'm ignoring anyone.
Oh, you know what you can do?
Yeah.
If you like, go to Makers Media. This is up to you. Go to Makers Media Network, makersmedianetwork.com. Fill out an application. It's free to join. It goes to a committee. They check you out, and if you're in, you're in. There's a hangout that's open 24/7 with me coming in and out. And there's a bunch of. I think that would be a good thing for you. As an aside, because there's a lot of people that you can speak with and all that, and interact, and maybe continue on with the show. It's a good idea to do.
No, and I appreciate it. I'll definitely check that out. But the other thing I was going to say to people is, by all means, hit me up on Facebook. I have an Instagram as well. I think Facebook is where I'm more active, but I'd love to talk to anyone who, have heard something like this and it keys off something with them and they want to continue that conversation. And I guess the only other thing I want to say is for the people that I know and have an ongoing kind of relationship with, I'm really sorry if I didn't get back to you guys. I'm usually asleep. That's all it is. I wish I could spend 24 hours a day on social media. And, there's a lot of people I know in the UK, there's a lot of people I know in America, and I love you all. And I'm going to say proud. I haven't got anything to be proud of, but I'm so proud of seeing your journeys, because it inspires me to keep going with what is going on here. And, it's an amazing, it took me a long time to find my tribe, and when I say I'm a maker, people always go, what do you make? And I go, you don't get it. I'm a maker in the sense of I'm connected with a larger group of people who are changing the world every time they go out and they create something. And really that's what we're doing. We're sharing our knowledge. We're creating things that, whether it becomes like as successful as the next iPhone, or if it just changes one person's need, that is what this world's all about. And to be able to do that surrounded by people who get it is extremely powerful.
Very good. Oh, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you this question. When is Javi's Woodshop's episode of Makers Monday going to air? Because he was asking about it.
Oh, okay, cool.
Keeps asking as well.
Cool.
Keeps asking. Okay. So what I actually do is because
Javi's asking, he ingrained it in my brain, like right. He kept hammering. He didn't really hammer it, but so he's asking in 2 points. You got the attack of the Javi. Go ahead.
So I don't know, people kind of like send this stuff in and they go, what happened? So what I try to do is I actually work out the schedule and I try to work to it. And when I've got time, I'll do 2 or 3. So I've got to look at the schedule, but no one's really hit me up this way. So really soon,
So you've never been attacked that way, double?
No, not yet. But it's nice. I mean, like the fact that someone sent it in, they're like, I'm really waiting for it, is great. It really comes just down to I've got a few. I don't want to actually hit buttons because I don't want to jump out of the hangout. But yeah, there's you're definitely there. I've seen it. It's all ready. I've just got to schedule it.
So what do we got?
Monday and Wednesdays, it'll kill me.
No. So what do we have to do to push him up on the schedule a little bit? What
I think he just got pushed up. I think he just got pushed up. Believe me.
All right, man. That's awesome.
My number system all out. No, that's all good.
I thank you for hanging out with us, man. So JP.
Yeah, I forgot to mention at the start of the show, I've been drinking out of my Marion Crafting mug. So if you want to get one of them, you can go to mancraftingtm.com, or I like to make cups. There's that. And I've also got to mention the podcast again. We've got a huge giveaway going on at the moment, which ends on the 25th of August. A week where one person can win 7 prizes. You can win a tub of Yorkshire Grit and a Yorkshire Grit hat, a Yorkshire Grit microfine paste and a Yorkshire Grit microfine paste hat, a Man Crafting mug, which has the Makers International logo on it, and you can win some custom hybrid blanks from Pam from Highland Boxes. So
I was going to say, it's so cool when I hear these names and I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. So to enter that, you can go to makersinternationalpodcast.com. You go to challenges and contests, go to the drop-down menu, huge giveaway, and go there, or you go to the Facebook page and there will be a link there somewhere. So,
Awesome.
all right.
Well, I'm glad that JP is back. There's a certain balance, that occurs. Not to knock anybody else, but so just to let you know, Gil, JP, I joined a group, a secret private group and like I met JP there, and he found out that I like the Beatles. I don't know how that worked out, but he actually went to Abbey Road and did a live from there and stuff, and we became close friends. I always say that once that happened, that's it. He can be annoying as heck, abusive most of the time, but he can do no wrong. It's just impossible because the Beatles. I mean, come on. Anyways, with all that said, I want to thank you guys for hanging out with us. It was great fun. I'll catch you guys next week. And so just have a great week and say goodbye, guys.
Thanks so
guys.
much for having me.